I always wanted to catch him off guard.
Class. Come on, class, keep your
right.
seat.
Hey, thank you all for coming. Welcome to the City Council meeting for September 3rd, 2019, 9 a.m. City of Hutchinson City Council meeting. If you would please call the roll.
Deckent.
Here.
Dave Line.
Here.
Soldner.
Here.
Pyros de Carvalho.
Here.
Inskeep.
Here.
Pledge of Allegiance.
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Daryl? Pastor Peterson?
Good morning.
Good morning.
Good morning.
Let's pray. Dear Heavenly and most gracious Father, a great honor to come before you today. And Father, it's a great honor to live in this wonderful city. We thank you, Father, for the council members, and we thank you for the leadership in each and every department. We continue to pray blessings over them and over the police department, fire department, every other department in this city. We thank you, Lord God, for today, for the meeting. And we pray, Father, for godly wisdom and common sense to go into effect. That, Father, decisions that are made, they affect some people on the positive and some on the negative. But, Father, we just thank you that we want to have the right decisions made so it turns out to be the best that it can be. That this city could be declared to be the best, and that would become a magnet to draw people into this city. And I thank you for that. In Jesus' name, amen.
Amen.
Thank you, sir. Next item.
Item 4A, Hutchinson Police Department Crime Reduction Strategy Report.
Chief?
Hi, Chief.
Good morning, Jeff Hooper, Chief, Police.
Good morning.
Good morning.
Thought it was a good time. There's been a lot published in the paper here recently and a lot of rumors going around kind of about where we stand and our crime stats and what our crime rate really is in the city of Hutchinson. And that in conjunction with kind of some additional timing, I just thought it was really kind of a good time to give you a briefing on where we're at, where I see us moving in the future, and what the plans are kind of moving forward. First, I'd like to, I would be remiss if I didn't give some kudos to Carly, who is our crime analyst. Basically, I say, I want to analyze this data, and this is what I want to collect, and this is what I want to present, and I tell her that, and then she makes it all pretty and makes it happen for me. So she did a lot of the work putting the presentation together. So maybe if we can get it pulled up here. There we go. Okay. Maybe.
Yeah, there it is.
Okay, so we'll talk a little bit about it. Want to talk a little bit about kind of where we came from. When I first got here, the two biggest questions that were posed to me is, what are you going to do about the drug problem in Hutchinson? And combined with that is, when are you going to assign a detective back into the drug enforcement unit? And then when are we going to get our community police officers back? And so I'll talk about how people think that community policing aspect doesn't tie into crime reduction, but it does, and it's a significant factor. And I'm going to talk about how that kind of plays a role. I think you guys have heard me say this before, that I don't believe that community policing is a program. I believe that it's a philosophy inside your department, something that you have to aspire to, and every officer is a community police officer. Every officer has to engage with the community, and that's our number one driving principle. I know that you're aware that we have a fixed beat system now. Each one of those beats has an email address and a cell phone number where citizens can contact their beat officers directly. In fact, there was about 12 of them this weekend, beat emails that I followed. And they range all from, hey, I think there's a drug house down the street I'd really like you to keep an eye on, to parking complaints or speeders through the area. And so our officers are able to interact with the citizens that way and really kind of connect back with the community, earn that public trust back, and be responsive to the community needs. And again, I'll talk about how that kind of plays a part in our crime reduction strategies. So this is where we were. When I first got here, Hutchinson had the 5th highest crime rate in the state of Kansas. At 53.7, that's per capita. So out of every 1,000 residents, 53.7 of them were a victim of a Part 1 crime. And I'll talk a little bit more about what Part 1 crimes are here in a minute, but those are the serious crimes in our community. We were only behind Wichita, Topeka, Kansas City, Kansas, and Merriam, which is a suburb of Kansas City. So we're at 53.7. The state average is 35.0. And so how are we going to bring that number down? And so our strategy, everything that we do at the police department is based off of two driving principles: that community police or community engagement, community policing piece that we talked about, and intelligence-led policing strategy. So there's no agency in the country that has enough police officers to set an officer on every corner and just be there to prevent crime. What this agency was doing was it was completely a 100% reactive agency, where a crime would happen and we would respond, and then we'd assign detectives to try to solve the crime. Well, what happens when you police like that is that the criminals control the crime in your community. They go and commit crimes, and we react and we respond to those crimes. And then they commit crimes and we respond and react. And steadily, the crime rate in Hutchinson through the years has just increased because of that. I don't like to play defense. I like to be a proactive and want to have a proactive style of law enforcement. So how do we do that, though? Because I can't just send officers out randomly. So we're basing everything that we do off an intelligence-led policing strategy, and I'll show you a little glimpse into what that looks like. But I can tell you where crime occurs, when it occurs, and then we deploy our resources appropriately to prevent that crime. So the idea is to not make a victim feel good that we're taking a report and we're going to do something after they've been a victim of a crime. The idea is to prevent them from being a victim of a crime in the first place. So we focus on two things. We focus on people, the people in our community that are preventing a crime, and places where the crimes are occurring in our community. In fact, I put a thing there. You can see our mission statement. Our mission is to foster trusting relationships while utilizing advanced law enforcement strategies to build a safer community. So both of those two driving principles, our community engagement and that intelligence-led policing strategy, are contained within that mission statement. That's our foundation. That's what we're about. So I want to talk a little bit about the DEU approach, because that was one of the big questions, in our intelligence-led policing strategy, and kind of give you an idea of the different approaches. So, and I don't want to try to be negative on anything that's happened before, but that DEU, that old style of drug enforcement, is old-fashioned, right? And what typically happens is you have some undercover detectives, and they go out and they kind of work it, and they buy drugs and they buy drugs and they buy drugs, and they spend thousands of dollars trying to buy drugs and track down a drug dealer in your community. Sometimes those investigations can take 6 months, 9 months, or even up to a year. And then finally they execute a search warrant and maybe arrest 1 or 2 people out of that. Well, the way the court system is set up today is a drug arrest or a drug offense, you're not going to see any jail time for it or prison time. So they spend 9 months investigating a case, a lot of resources and man hours. They arrest a couple people, they go to jail, they bond out, and they're back out on the street the same day, and they can go right back to selling drugs. So the key to keeping those people off the street is to encourage them that this is not a place that they want to sell their drugs, because we're going to be there. We're going to be there every time they turn around. Just one of the strategies we deployed a couple nights ago was a proactive approach, and we put officers out in teams in some of our higher crime areas. And in 3.5 hours, we made 10 arrests, and 3 of those were brand new drug arrests. We did that in 3.5 hours as opposed to a 9-month investigation. So I kind of put this analogy up here to kind of describe to you how the two systems work differently. So let's say that we had a retail business in town. We'll just use Walmart because that's what Carly used for me, right? So let's say we didn't want them here and we wanted to close them down. How would you do that? So the DEU approach, that old drug enforcement approach, does this. They know that that drug house or that retail business gets deliveries. Trucks come in all the time. So what they do is they start focusing on 1 or 2 people that are doing those deliveries. They start focusing on 1 or 2 of those trucks. So they have to figure out what the truck routes are. They have to figure out where those shipments are coming from, what time of day they get there. And then they work on eliminating those shipments, right? Well, if you eliminate 1 or 2, it takes you 9 months, and you eliminate 1 or 2 trucks, there's 50 other trucks that are still delivering into your community. So it really doesn't have an effect on crime. You really can't reduce crime. You really can't reduce your drug activity in that manner because the investigations just take too long. And if you don't believe me, just look, that DEU has been in place for over 30 years. But drugs keep going up and crime keeps going up in the community. So there has to be a better way. So remember, our focus is on people and places. So if you take our retail business, what we would do is we would put people out in front of that business, officers out in front of that business, just talking to people when they're trying to come into that business, letting them know that we're there. And with law enforcement presence, the criminals, the people that want to buy drugs, are not going to come to that business because there's police around all the time. And then eventually you start putting pressure on the employees, and you arrest a few of the employees who have to go and get those drugs or are trying to sell those drugs. And then pretty soon that business says, well, we can't get our customers in our store, and we're losing some of the people, some of our employees. It's not profitable to be here anymore, so they close down the store. You don't have to close it down. They close it down for you. That's the idea, and that's the approach that we're taking to crime in the community as well. So right now, kind of let you know where we're at with our proactive units. We have the repeat offender unit. I have one full-time detective assigned to that unit and 6 part-time officers. Those officers are assigned to regular patrol duties, but on their days off, they're coming in, because we're so short people still, they're coming in on their days off and performing some of our proactive functions, or we assign them to special assignments. Sometimes on their regular duty shift, if we have extra officers on, they're freed up to do proactive activity. And then, we have the 2 canine officers with their 2 canine units. So we have 2 teams there. This is what and I'll give you a summary this is what we've been able to accomplish this year. Let me explain this to you a little bit. If you look at that top graph, that's the last 4 years, 16, 17, 18, and then current year 2019. The numbers in January, for example, represent the number of Part 1 crimes that occurred in January in each one of those given years. The red year, so if you see 2017, January 2017, where there was 209 Part 1 crimes, out of that 4-year period, that was the highest year. The green is the lowest year for Part 1 crimes. You can see through the first 7 months of this year, we have reduced Part 1 crimes, so we're the lowest that we've been out of any month through the first 7 months of Part 1 crimes. So, and it's a significant decrease, and I'll be able to explain to you later on what that is when I don't want to give you the end of the story, right? So Part 1 crimes, you're basically talking about larceny, which is theft, burglaries, motor vehicle theft, or theft from motor vehicles, arson, homicide, rape, aggravated assault, and robbery. So all our major crimes. Typically speaking, your property crimes are what drive those numbers up. We have more property crimes than anything else. A lot of that is theft. If I wanted to reduce those numbers kind of artificially, I would set about 5 officers at Walmart and not let any shoplifting occur, right? But that's important, but that's not really what we want to counter. That's not really what is going to make our community a safer place to live. So these are true reductions in our Part 1 crimes. The graph in the middle, you see the red line, the red squiggly line is the high number, so that's the highest crime rate. The green is the lowest, and the blue is the average of where you would be in the average. Those yellow bars at the bottom are where we're at this year. So it's just a pictorial of what is above. So you'll see every year we were below the lowest number for the last 4 years. The bottom chart is calls for service. And you see that even our calls for service, because we've reduced crime and we're not responding to as many calls for service, green all along the bottom until we get to July. And I'm actually happy that July isn't green, and I'll tell you why. Because we are increasing our community engagement, and those are now tracked calls for service. So that adds into our calls for service. But we're not responding to crimes. We're engaging with the community on a self-initiated calls for service that the officers are performing. So that's all Part 1 crimes. Here's Part 1 property crimes. So this just includes the larceny, auto burglary, residential burglaries, motor vehicle theft, arson. So you can see that we're significantly low in all our Part 1 property crimes. This is Part 1 violent crimes. So there's not a huge number here. You see that during the first part of the year we weren't high, but we weren't achieving the numbers that I wanted. We weren't as low. We put some emphasis on that. And you can see the last 3 months we've had some success there, which are the lowest 3 months. I'll tell you at the end kind of where we're at total for year to date with Part 1 violent crimes. But you see when you're dealing with 10, 12, you have 1 or 2 in a month, and it really drives your percentages up. So this is our community engagement piece. We've been doing community engagement since I first got here, although what I said was I directed officers, I want you out in the community. I want you talking to business owners. I want you going door to door in your communities. We have the platoons that they have a form that they go and they're actually knocking on doors in neighborhoods and they're talking to the residents. Say, hey, how are things going in your neighborhood? There's any suspicious activity? How you do? What's the quality of life in your neighborhood? What can we do to help you improve your neighborhood? Questions like that. I have a mandate that there's an officer in every school in this community, a minimum of one time a week. A lot of that is they'll high-five kids when they're getting off the bus in the morning. Some of my officers go and have lunch with kids at lunchtime. I have a couple officers that go to the little ones and do story time with them once or twice a week. So we weren't tracking those community engagements up until June, and we started tracking them, and I told my staff we're going to be tracking them, but I didn't give them any direct guidance. You see, we only had 99. And so I got on my staff and I said, that's not acceptable. Every officer should be able to get at least one community engagement every shift. And so that's about 14 or 15 shifts a month. So I want that number up in the 400s. So in July, we actually had 314 community engagements, which is a lot better. And I'll show you how that plops out on the map and how that affects our crime reduction strategy. So when I asked Carly to analyze and give me this data, let me explain this to you. The red dots are crime. Basically property crime that occurred in the second quarter of this year. The black dots are self-initiated arrests from those proactive units. But remember, it's not all about arrest. The yellow dots are community engagement that we did. So, I don't know, this looks like kind of a hodgepodge of dots, right? So if you can pick out any patterns there that might be important, I'll help you out since we don't have all day. So here we go. This is what's important to me. As soon as I saw this chart, this popped out to me. If you look at the circle on the right, that circle is full of crime. All those red dots are property crimes. Not one proactivity in that circle. Not an arrest, not any community engagement. And I guess I should orient you, right? So this is one beat. So the black lines are 11th and Plum. So Plum, north and south, 11th and Plum. So you're really talking 1 beat and 2 beat here. So we had a whole bunch of crime occurring in that right circle and 2 beat and no officer interaction with the community other than to respond to those crimes. If you look at the circle over on the left, a lot of community engagement, a lot of officers in the area, no crime in that circle. That's a pattern, right? So how do we fix it, right? I said, we have a problem in 2 beat. We've got to get on 2 beat. So let me show you how this all kind of comes together. This is what happened in the month of July. That X is a repeat offender, one of our major criminals in this community. It lives relatively in that area. We didn't pinpoint his address for you, but it's a drug house. This is 1 beat. So that's 11th and Plum. So this is 1 beat. All Southwest Bricktown area, right? 1 beat. This is the crime that happened in the month of July, and these are violent crimes and burglaries that happened in the month of July in Southwest Bricktown area, 1 beat, roughly. So you look, is there a pattern in conjunction with that repeat offender? Here's our arrest. Here's our proactive arrest that occurred in that area. And much better in July, here's our community engagements for that area. I'll show you a pattern here. Watch this. All the community engagements, all the arrests, and you see where the crimes took place in the gaps in between. But it is a reduction of crime for 1 beat. Remember I talked about how important community engagement was. This is every self-initiated community engagement 1 month. Remember there's like 319, I think was the number. This is where the officers are getting out, self-initiating, talking to people, getting out, talking to their businesses, being in their schools. But what we encouraged them to do, remember it was about people and places. So before I just said go out and engage with the community, right? And I gave them some guidance. Now my officers get those maps of where crime is occurring, and they sit down with a briefing with their staff from my captain. I brief my captain, and he briefs his staff on down to the line level officers, and then I attend some shift details to make sure they understand that. This is what I tell them. It's not about going out and arresting all the bad guys. In fact, making arrests is one of the most limited things that you can do to affect the crime rate. what you have to do is engage with the community. So when we see a crime trend popping up, we don't just all of a sudden throw a bunch of officers in there and say arrest everybody. What we say is go talk to the people in the neighborhood, right? Get out into that neighborhood and make public contacts, because this is what happens. If I have an officers going door to door, they're going to contact one of two people. They're going to talk to people in the community who are wonderful, upstanding members that want crime reduced in their neighborhood. And they're going to tell us about that and the problems in their neighborhood. Or they're going to knock on the door of the dope dealer's house. And they're going to say, they're going to know that we're there. They're going to talk to them and say, hey, we're just working in the neighborhood. We really want to really focus on this neighborhood. And so then they see officers parked in cars out in front of their house, running radar or going door to door talking to people. And every time they turn around, there's more and more officers in their neighborhood. Remember, we talked about closing down that retail business analogy. And pretty soon, we get people coming and going from their house. We put in selective enforcement. We run canine dogs around their car and we find drugs. Well, now they can't get their employees to their dope dealing business. And they can't get their customers there because there's a cop parked in the neighborhood walking up and down the street talking to people night and day. So they close down their drug business because it's not profitable for them to have it there. So I won't get into too much detail. Then what we have to worry about is displacement. They just move to another part of town. Well, they move their operation and we follow them. We know where they're going, we know who they are, and we follow them. Pretty soon they say, you know what? It's not good to have my dope business in Hutchinson. I'm going to move out of town. Maybe we arrest them and put them in jail, but most of the time they're just going to leave. So this is our proactive, our proactive units and how productive they've been. You see that in January with our repeat offender unit, we were kind of just getting our sea legs underneath us, and we started ramping up. These are the number of arrests that the proactive unit made. Most of those are drug arrests, and these are arrests that would not, drug arrests or warrant arrests. I'll show you the breakdown here in a minute. And all the canine arrests are drug arrests. And those are drug arrests in this community that would have never occurred if we didn't have a proactive policing strategy. Those would have been people that would have just delivered their drugs if we didn't actively seek them out. So remember the old way, the DEU, 1 or 2 arrests in a 9-month period. This is what we've done just for the first part of this year. This is just canine cases versus arrests. So they've made, you can see the number of cases they've made in any given month, and then the arrests that they've made in conjunction with those, and these are drug cases, drug dealers that we've taken out of our community. This is a repeat offender activity, so you can see the total number of arrests, the number of warrants cleared by those arrests, and then how many of those arrests along the bottom line are self-initiated, so that are not warrant arrests. There are arrests for additional charges that are not for warrants, and again, most of those are drug arrests, drug cases, drug dealers in our community. So, you heard me say all that. I told you where we were, right? 5th worst crime rate in the state. You saw all the stats. Here's where we are today. So burglaries, structure burglaries are down 44% from where we were last year because of these strategies. Auto burglaries are down 48%. Overall property crime is down 26%. Violent crime is down 7.8%. Total Part 1 crime is down 32%. At the beginning of the year, I talked to my command staff and I said, we're going to employ these strategies and we have to get our crime rate down. We've got to make this a safer community. So I asked my operations commander, what can you give me this year? He says, Chief, I think we can lower crime by 4%. That's what he said his goal at. We're at 32%. So we're going to do better than 4%.
Can I go ahead?
So remember, this was our crime rate. There's the state average. This is our crime rate as of today. It's below the state average, 31.6.
That's incredible.
So I'm really proud of what we've been able to accomplish so far. You know that we've also become kind of what I like to say is like a destination agency. We're drawing in officers from other agencies. I have 16 officers in training right now that should be deploying on the street here really within the next few months. And so remember, we've been doing this with basically 1 full-time detective, some part-time police officers, 6 of them, and then 2 canine guys that are working this part-time. So where do we go? I'm not satisfied with that 31%. I want us to get into the 20s. right? Remember, the state average is 35. We need to be in the 20s to make this a model city and a place that's safe for people to come and raise a family. So how are we going to do that? So they've been doing that with limited personnel. So as those new officers start to come online, I've got a phase 2 plan. Even my staff doesn't know what phase 2. Carly asked me when we got here, are you going to tell the council what phase 2 is? Because they all want to know. I says, well, no, but what it's going to mean is those resources are going to be devoted towards our proactivity, the way that we've been enforcing crime and the way that we've been engaging with our community and the way we've been lowering the crime rate, because I know it's working. I know it's effective, and I'm going to put more manpower there. So the answer to the question, and this is what's important for you as well, is, you know, if I'm going to put somebody into DEU, I'm not. Because to me, that's an old-fashioned strategy. I've talked to the sheriff about our strategy, about my strategy, and the success that we're having here. And I says, why don't you put some detectives in our proactive unit to help us fight crime this way? But he doesn't want to do that. He wants to do the DEU, and that's his right, and that's fine. And I hope they are 100% successful, because we're all towards the same common goal. But I'm responsible for the citizens of Hutchinson, and to make this the safest community possible. And I know this is the way to do it. And so those resources are going to be devoted towards this manner of law enforcement as opposed to the old style DEU. So, and I've talked to Mr. Deardoff. We've talked to county staff a little bit, and officially we're going to be pulling out of the DEU, because this is where I'm going to devote our resources and our manpower, because I know it's an effective style of law enforcement. I have the stats that we're tracking to prove it. So that's kind of our plan
As long as you got the data.
moving forward. So I'd stand for any questions if you have them.
Well, first of all, kudos. Obviously, we gave you applause when you got there to the green arrow down. So that is excellent progress. You mentioned you have 16 officers in training. I take it they're trained at the law enforcement training center. Or
They're in various stages. So I have, I might get the numbers wrong. I've got, I think, 7 in field training that are out with other officers in the field. I have 6, I think, at the academy. I have 6 at the academy. No, it's the other way around. 6 in field training. I have 7 at the academy, and I have 3 that we just hired that are in they haven't even gone to the academy yet. So 16.
Where's that going to leave you, assuming all of those people become sworn officers?
We'll be
as far as your
6
complement?
short.
6 short.
Yep. So right now we're effectively working 22 officers short out of an authorized strength of 75. But I want to get that number. I would like to be full staff, but I want to get that number under 5. And if we can maintain a level where our staffing levels are, within 5 understaffed, then we're going to be fine. And that's why I haven't deployed phase 2 or an additional strategy, just because we've got to be able to respond to calls, because you still have to react to calls that are occurring as well. I simply don't have the manpower right now. But it's coming. They're in the pipeline. They're getting trained up. So,
I've heard in the past that crime statistics have to do with what or how you report.
yes,
Is that accurate?
it can.
Or can be?
Okay.
So where I'm going then is our reporting today reporting in the same fashion, or how is it different if it is from a year ago or several years ago?
We haven't changed our reporting. Let me tell you what can happen. I could lower these crime rates by another 10% today just by how we report. And it's called the hotel rule. So it got implemented several years ago, whereas if a criminal goes to a hotel and breaks into several different rooms, so let's say 10 of them, that could be 10 reports and 10 stats, or it can be 1. And they hotel rule that together and only count it as 1. And at hotels, you're almost mandated to do that, because it all happens at the same time. It's only one structure, and so that's 1. But what happened was chiefs got pressure to lower the crime rate in their community. So they started taking that hotel rule and they liberally applied it. So if I have 10 auto burglaries that happened in the same block or within a couple blocks of each other on the same night, I hotel rule that together and I count it as 1. And you lower stats. The problem is that's artificially lowering your stats. That doesn't give you a true depiction of the crime that's going on in your community. I won't report crime that way, and because I can't track it then, because there'll only be 1 dot there as opposed to 10 dots, and I wouldn't see a crime spree, and we wouldn't deploy our resources appropriately. So we report crime and we report every single crime. So I could easily lower that crime rate artificially, but I don't do that. Some agencies in Kansas still do, though.
So, from those that do you have any sense of what kind of impact that has on our statewide 35% or 35.0?
Yeah, obviously it brings that number down.
Mhm.
It brings that average down because they're not accurately reporting their crime. The KBI does get out and audit individual agencies, but we just had our audit here a couple weeks ago, and they pulled 10 cases and say, well, you're either underreporting or you're overreporting. So it's not really a true audit, you know. So those agencies that underreport those crimes most likely will never get caught, and they can continue to do that. I wouldn't even begin to venture a guess on how many agencies are reporting crimes like that. Yeah.
Thanks, Steve, for asking the
Go ahead.
question. I phrased it too, and I struggled with how I was going to word it, but I heard the same thing. I didn't realize or didn't remember the hotel rule being part of the nomenclature or whatever, but
Right.
and just to reemphasize, you're doing it the same way that we did in years past.
Yes.
We counted them all. So those are true reflections of a drop in
Yeah, that was one of the things that I was pleased when I got here, is that even before I got here, we were accurately reporting true crime. And I continued that, where we're accurately reporting. So these numbers, these reductions are true reductions in the number of crimes that occur. So if you think we went from, you know, if you go from 53 to 31, that's 14. So for every 1,000 citizens in this community, there's 14 less victims. If you multiply that by roughly 40,000, you know, that's how many less victims of crime we're going to have in Hutchinson this year. So.
Well, I look forward to the future. I think the job will become harder as
It
you
will.
get as you get the numbers down. You don't have that high to start with
Right.
to come down off of. But
Yeah,
I
the
think
first
then
10% is easier than,
Yeah,
you know, the increments that follow. for
So
sure.
I think the challenge you will face, of course, is getting down to where you're saying in the 20s, and then maintaining that.
Yeah.
Obviously, I really like the community policing, community engagement aspect of what you're doing. I know that as a body, we promoted several years ago getting back into community policing, and I think what we did was better than what we had been doing. But this is certainly a leap, a large leap above that as well. And when it's a matter of engaging the entire community, I think that's excellent.
Thank you, sir.
And we'll continue to monitor the staffing levels, obviously. I know there's going to be a certain amount of attrition, so it would be a great situation if we got all 16 officers from A all the way to Z and out on the streets. But we'll continue. I'm sure you'll keep us abreast of that as well.
Certainly. Yes, sir.
Chief, I know I was one that was really disappointed that we weren't putting any kind of resources into DEU or any kind of drug enforcement strategies at all. So just really commend you for showing us the way that it could be done. Thrilled to see that piece of the drug abuse problem being tackled in a more effective way. And then as a community, we just need to figure out the other side on the treatment and detox, and just really want to commend you and your entire agency. It's just what our community needed, and like Deckett said, excited to see how it moves forward. So thank you.
Thank you. Yes, ma'am.
Anybody else?
Thank you.
Thank you, Chief.
Yes, sir.
Thank you.
Thank you
Thank
very
you.
much, Chief.
Next item.
Item 4B, oral communications from the audience.
Perfect. This is the portion of the meeting where we invite anybody who wants to address the council with items that are not on the agenda. Please limit your remarks to 5 minutes, and if you'll give your name and address, we will accept your comments at this time. No big rush coming up to the podium, so we'll assume that means nobody has anything to offer at this point. Next item, please.
Item 5, consent agenda.
Oh, Trent, were you headed up?
No.
I can reverse field. Okay. Before I accept a motion on the consent agenda, I was going to ask Dejada if she might maybe approach the podium. And with her is, I know, at least 2 of the folks that are new appointees to the Human Relations Commission. Maybe you can tell us a little bit about them, and I'm familiar with the process because I was part of the process, but anyways.
Thank you. DeJada Moore, Human Relations Officer for the City of Hutchinson. I am really thrilled with what we've done with the commission these last few months, just that recruitment effort. We had an overwhelming, I think, 15 applications when we anticipated maybe 2 or 3.
Right.
And so this was really exciting. So today we have with us in the room, we've got Joel Reese, if you would stand, and then we've got Julia Johnson. Would you please stand? And then the 2 other folks that are coming aboard, Jesse Yuma and Tammy Kraus. They unfortunately could not be with us today, but they will be on board and starting their first meeting on the 18th of September. We are just thrilled with these folks. I have to thank Mayor Inskeep for just your effort to help us make sure that the board is diverse, that the board has a good group of voices and people that are active and willing to be active in the work that we're going to be doing. So with that, anything else we can share, we're happy to do, but welcome to Joel and Julia.
Welcome. Thank you. And I concur with DeJada had to say, their enthusiasm and spirit and a lot of the things that they bring to the table, their diverse backgrounds, very exciting. I expect great things from this group going forward. So thank you for that, and thanks for coming. With that, then, if there is a motion or any other questions within the consent agenda?
Yeah, I would move to approve the consent agenda and authorize the mayor to sign.
Second.
Moved and seconded, please call the roll.
Deckent?
Yes.
Dave
Yes.
Soldner?
Yes.
Pyrus de Carvalho?
Yes.
Inskeep?
Yes. Next
one.
item, please.
Mayor, just clarify
Oh.
that Joel's appointment was added to that
Yeah.
motion. Just
Forgive
I
me.
think
And
it's
that-
clear, but
Yeah, that
Just
is
for the
part of the
record.
motion. Yeah,
Yeah.
absolutely. It was a little late to the
That's
table,
all right.
but yeah, we're all good. Thank you again, John. All right, next item, if you would, please.
Item 6A, consider resolution setting a public hearing regarding unsafe and dangerous structures.
Now I'm up here.
Okay, I'd say I cut you short earlier. Or?
Yeah, no,
Okay.
good morning, Trent Maxwell, building official for the city. I was so excited about this, I wanted to come up early, but no. I'm back again. This is our structures determined to be unsafe and dangerous. This process, as you know, I'll go out, I evaluate structures based on blight, structural hazards, issues within the neighborhood. A lot of these are complaint driven from all these different aspects is how I create the list and then whittle it down to what we figure is a list that we can manage. This is all out of our Chapter 21, Section 701. A couple of the definitions there are substandard buildings and structural hazards. Those are some of the definitions I use to help define these structures to create this list. And as you know, this is just to set a public hearing. So I do not have a presentation today, but when we have the public hearing, I will have a presentation so you can see the properties. And those people at home or in the audience can also see the properties. Part of this resolution, if the hearing is motion and approved, we will publish once each week for 2 consecutive weeks on the same day. Each week, and at least 30 days shall elapse between the last publication and the date set for the hearing. The properties that we are recommending to keep on this list of unsafe and dangerous structures are 225 East First. There are 3 housing structures on this property. 516 East 2nd, 1701 East 2nd, 840 East 4th, 2100 South Bone Break. There are a couple different structures on this property, one being commercial, one being residential. 207 East Avenue E, 624 East Avenue E, 600 South Elm, 204 East F, 1301 South Maple, 1600 North Prairie, 413 West Sherman, and 4 Woodson Plaza. At this time, I'd recommend the resolution be approved, the set dates and time for the public hearing to condemn the structures as described in the resolution. The recommendation is to set the public hearing date as of October 15, 2019. If you have any questions.
Trent, are the owners of these properties already aware that you're moving to place them on the demolition list?
We have sent out certified letters. We have posted the structures. There are 2 structures due to special circumstances with the structures we physically did not post. But the rest of them have a letter that is also posted to the structure as well as a placard.
Okay.
So to the best of our ability, we have
You've
contacted
done what
them.
you could do to notify the
Mhm.
property owners, okay?
Yep.
And these are all unoccupied, correct?
Yes, I believe one is being used as a storage shed, so occupied for storage use, but not for habitation.
Okay, thank you.
I recognize that there's a couple commercial structures on there. I could be remembering incorrectly, but have we seen those in the past?
We've seen
Periodically.
commercial structures on our list before, sure. This year we do have a couple. The church on the 600 South Elm, that is one that we've received complaints on for many, many years. We've tried to notify the owner in years previous to now and have not had any communication. So that is why that one is on. There is 2100 South Bone Break, which you're probably well familiar with, off of 50 and Blanchard. That is the old Bernard's restaurant.
Mhm.
Oh, okay.
And I've been in communication with them. I'm not sure the direction that they're going to want to go, but they will, I'm sure, be here on the 15th to discuss with you any plans that they may have. Then the other commercial structure is the old Beepster's Liquor, and I've spoke to that owner. She'll be here on the 15th. She's weighing all options. I don't know what conclusion she'll come to, so there will be some that will come and speak to you, I'm sure, on the 15th.
Very good. And I would encourage anybody that's watching, listening, that gets the letter, has seen the posting, come down, let us know what's going on. But please come prepared, as always, with a plan, both financially and specifically to contractors and things like that, so that we can measure that. I think, as history has shown, we've been very fair, oftentimes trying to accommodate individuals when best we can, but we also recognize that life gets in the way, money, financial challenges can be realistic, and go from there. And I know Trent will work with you as well going forward, so thank you. Anything, commentary about the particular properties, or is there a motion?
I'd just like to second your comments. I think you talked about our being fair. I think maybe we were too lenient. This year, I know for myself, I'll be looking to have good, solid plans, not just kind of fluffy stuff in the air. And from folks, if people are wanting to truly seek, and legitimately and realistically seek to bring those properties to a condition that they would be satisfactory, I want to give them certainly opportunities, but I'll be less willing if there isn't good, solid plans, realistic plans to go along with that desire.
I know you always emphasize that, but you might articulate that to them, this body, because I agree with Steve. We want to be fair, and we want to give a certain opportunity whenever we can, but without a set plan, we've just seen too many of these where life happens, somebody gets ill, and life does occur, and so then we're no further than we were, and we're 3 months down the road, 6 months down the road, a year down the road.
No, absolutely. One of the first things I express to them once they start receiving the letters and make contact with me is to find out the cost. The cost sometimes answers their own question. So to find out the true cost of rehab if they do want to save the structure, and then the time frame. And we've expected that on each time coming forth on like October 15th. Whether or not they follow through and are able to produce that is usually the shortcoming. So
I might also ask, do you have the opportunity, or your staff or whatever, to give them some guidance, maybe point them in some directions? If it's a paint issue, brush up Hutch. If it's certain other things, maybe there's certain organizations that are in that field of helping to to rebuild houses. Do you try and guide them to those sources? Do you have the means to do so?
I mean, the means is only the knowledge of the groups that have helped
Sure.
citizens in the past. And with the program Brush Up Hutch, we mention that on everything, our
Of course.
property maintenance violations, as well as these. Usually, if we're coming for paint, that's not the issue for this.
I know that was
But it could
maybe
be,
a piece
it
of the
could be
puzzle.
a
but
finish of it, yes.
There you go. If it takes a little off their bottom line, maybe it
Yep.
becomes a more realistic opportunity.
But there's one organization that has been able to help some people in the past, and we make sure to mention them. I'm usually the one. Their point of contact is myself, so I'll visit with them, do a walkthrough of the premise if they want, and the property, and see what my expectations are. We do the best we can to educate them and give them whatever tools we can. It's definitely not enough tools to solve the problem.
Sure.
But we do what we can to help them, sure.
We've also talked about in the past, some folks come to the conclusion that it might be smart to just sell the property to an investor. Maybe somebody has the means to fix the property up or whatever. I assume you list that as one of your options, or?
Yes, it depends on the situation. So there's some that will talk about selling it. And I don't have any issue with that. What I explain to them is the time doesn't stop. That new owner or whoever you're presenting need to show up to council. You need to present your plan. And so whether it's you we're dealing with or the new owner, the expectations are still the same.
Still the same.
Yep.
Yeah. Very good. Any other questions, comments? Motion?
I will move to approve the resolution that sets the date of October 15, 2019, and the time of 9 a.m. for a public hearing for the purpose of the condemnation of unsafe and dangerous structures within the city of Hutchinson, and authorize the mayor to sign.
Second.
Okay, it's been moved and seconded. Please call the roll.
Deckett?
Yes.
Dave
Yes.
Soldner?
Yes.
Pyros de Carvalho?
Yes.
Inskeep.
Yes. Next item, please.
Item 6B, consider ordinance amending main trafficway improvements, ordinance 2016-7.
Angela Richard, Director of Finance. I come before you this morning to ask you to amend Ordinance 2016-7. This ordinance allowed us to use bond proceeds for Phase 3 of Main Street between 7th Avenue and 16th Avenue. We bonded in 2016 and 2018 using this ordinance. So part of the bond proceeds we have were from 16. The remainder that we have left over is from the 2018 bond issue, and we have approximately $430,000 left over that we would like to use for the next phase of Main Street and to reduce what we will bond in spring 2020. In order to do this, we have to fix a technical item here where the ordinance only allowed us to go down to 7th Street, and the next phase will go down to 5th Street or 5th Avenue. So we are asking that you approve this ordinance to amend ordinance 2016-7 so that we will be allowed to use that. Are there any questions?
Can you remind me the total bond amount in 2020 for 5th to 7th?
Okay. In 2016, we bonded $1.5 million. In 2018, we bonded $725,000.
What are we scheduled to bond for 2020?
Oh, for 2020 for this project, I believe the total project was 3.6 million.
Yeah.
3.6. So this would
3.6, yeah.
reduce that to 3.2.
Okay. Thank you.
Come on up, Jeff.
It would actually be a little bit less than that because some of the funding of the water main replacements going out of the water side, so it'd be another potentially up to $800,000 less than that. So
Oh,
it'd
wow.
be whatever.
And on the
400.
water side, reserve funds are
Correct.
In place to pay for that?
Correct. Yeah, that's the way it's kind of set up for this project. So anyway.
Well, this is a happy day.
What trends do you see in terms of interest rates going forward?
Interest rates are really low right now. So what the council will probably see soon is bond refinancing so we can take
Refinancing.
advantage of some
Okay. savings.
I hope to couple that with the LEC remodel so that we can lower bond costs because we will have that as well.
We've gotten some very competitive and low bond rates over the last several years, haven't we?
We have.
And things are even dropping a little more now, the way it seems.
You had to say it out loud, Steve.
Yeah.
I don't think it's going to change it one way or the other.
Just messing.
Well, I would move to approve the ordinance amending ordinance number 2016-7 of the City of Hutchinson, Kansas, authorizing the construction of certain main trafficway improvements and authorizing the issuance of GEO bonds to pay the cost thereof and authorize the mayor to sign.
Second.
It's been moved and seconded. Please call the roll.
Deckent?
Yes.
Dave
Yes.
Soldner? Pyros de Carvalho?
Yes.
Inskeep?
Yes. Next item, please.
Item 7A, consider 2019 JAG grant application.
Jeff Hooper, Chief of Police, again. This is the annual JAG grant, or Edward Burns Justice Assistance Grant. Typically, this is just a federal grant that comes out every year, and the money that they grant to individual jurisdictions is predetermined based off of your population and your crime rate. So next year we'll probably get, I'm hoping we get less, actually, but so you can see that the amount this year is for $22,101. It's about $120 less than what we got last year. So basically what we got last year. We do need to have a public hearing and then officially accept the grant. There are no matching funds for the grant. Last year we used the grant to purchase first aid supplies, first aid kits, tourniquets, and things like that for officers. This year, along with some MRF money that we have, we intend to use the grant funds to purchase rifles so we can put a rifle in every one of the patrol vehicles. Right now, most of the rifles are just individually or personally owned rifles, or we have a couple that officers are using, and that's just not, in today's day and age, that's just not the right thing to do. So.
I'm amazed there are personally owned rifles being carried by some of the officers.
Yeah, and they have to get approval from me for that. They have to carry a certain
Right.
caliber. They have to carry a certain type of rifle. They have to qualify with them. But officers know how important that is, and a lot of my officers have purchased their own rifles for that reason. And we need to be furnishing those rifles for our officers.
I agree.
There's a distinction between a rifle and a shotgun, correct?
That's correct.
Okay.
We still carry a shotgun, and our shotguns we use a lot for less lethal beanbag rounds and things like that. But you know, in most of the school shootings or the active shooter scenarios, they're almost always armed with an automatic rifle. And to ask an officer to try to counter that force with a handgun or even a shotgun is a recipe for disaster. We'll lose lives that way. And so that's why we need, and the setup that we would have for the rifles is every single rifle would be exactly the same, set up exactly the same, zeroed exactly the same. So it doesn't matter what car you would reach in and grab that rifle out of, you're basically pulling the exact same rifle out. So
Makes sense.
that's what we'd use the grant funds for.
Do you have an idea of what sort of weapon you're going to be looking at?
Yeah, I do. Well, there'll be 223 round rifles, basically, is a platform that we're using. We're working on whether we have some of those rifles. We have a set number of those rifles that are all equipped exactly the same in our ERT team that utilizes, and we may very well roll those rifles down to patrol and then put the new ones in ERT, but they'll be exactly the same rifle.
Very good. Any other questions of Chief?
I would move to approve the 2019 Edward Byrne Justice Assistance Grant application, authorize the mayor to sign.
Sir, we do have to have a public hearing for the grant application.
Oh, okay. That is
so we need to open
Just
public
open it up for a public hearing and then close it and then.
Okay,
Right.
would somebody move
So
to?
move.
Okay, there it is.
Second.
And seconded. Please call the roll. Linda's like, what just happened?
Yeah, hang on here. I'm a little behind now. Deckent?
Yes.
Dave
Yes.
Soldner? Yes. Pyros de Carvalho?
Yes.
Inskeep?
Yes. Now then, with the public hearing being open, is there anybody who would like to speak to this JAG grant? Anybody on the council want to add anything to the conversation? If not,
Well, just as I'm glad that this is the choice the chief is making. It does amaze me at this day and age that we have a situation where we have officers who are feeling like they need to purchase their own weapon, and even though has to be approved, we ought to be providing the equipment that our staff need, whether it's the police department, fire department, or whatever. So I'm glad that you're making this move.
yeah, good recognition and proactive stance again. Take care of it. So. Is there a motion to close the public hearing?
So move.
Second? Is there?
Second.
And please call the roll.
Deckent?
Yes.
Dave
Yes.
Soldner?
Yes.
Tyra Sticker-Follow?
Yes.
Inskeep?
Yes. John, would you care to make that, or is the motion still standing?
Yeah, I would move to approve the 2019 Edward Byrne Justice Assistance Grant application, authorize the mayor to sign.
I don't recall if we have a second.
We need a second.
Second.
Second it is. Please call the roll again, if you would, please.
Deckent?
Yes.
Dave
Yes.
Soldner?
Yes.
Tyra Sticker-Follow?
Yes.
Inskeep?
Yes. Next item.
Item 7B, consider bids for Fun Valley restroom renovations.
Good morning. Justin Combs, Director of Parks and Facilities. This item is for renovations to restrooms, the main restrooms at Fun Valley. So it's just the restrooms on the main structure in between fields 1 through 4. The restrooms are 38 years old. They've had very minor maintenance in that time. So we've painted, we've fixed broken fixtures, all sorts of things, but we've never really fully renovated the restrooms. I didn't bring pictures, but you can imagine what a 38-year-old restroom in a park looks like. So for this project, we really are going to gut the restrooms, all new fixtures. The walls will receive a fiberglass reinforced panel. So if you think of a like a gas station type restroom that has those plastic paneling, so we'll have panels all the way across the walls. Epoxy flooring. One of the biggest problems we have is 38 years of stuff getting trapped into the floors, into the concrete floors that are porous. So we'll do an epoxy treatment on the floors, which will seal those floors up, really make it easy to clean, as well as with the panels. All new partitions, all new toilets, all new sinks. The layouts will change just slightly, so that we're ADA compliant. But really, it's a complete gut of the restrooms at Fun Valley, so very much needed. This is probably the single biggest complaint that Hutch Rec receives about Fun Valley, is the restrooms. We did receive really good bids, really competitive bids. I was estimating about $200,000 for this project. As you can see, the bids came in very tight. We have 4 of them grouped very closely together. Ward Davis was low bid at $149,760. We've had a great relationship with Ward. He's always produced really good work for us. So it is my recommendation to proceed with Ward Davis. As far as timing goes, we will begin in September. We have 1 tournament the last weekend in September. That'll be our last tournament for the year. So then the restrooms can be completely shut down, and then they'll be operational again in February when the college starts back up for softball. I do want to point out on the agenda there was a small typo. The number is slightly off by $10. So the contract amount is $149,760. The agenda says 50. So, but the correct number is 760. With that, I will stand for any questions.
Hey, Justin, just one quick question. What is the extent of the plumbing and the main line and all of that? Is that all a part of the scope of work here?
It is, and that's part of the reason why we are putting those reinforced fiberglass panels there. So now we're actually creating a wall in front of the concrete block wall. So all that plumbing that has to be redone will be hidden. So it will be all new plumbing. Some of the drains, some of the toilets have to move slightly. So we'll have to cut the floor open and modify some of the plumbing. Yep. So all new plumbing. There is one unknown with the vent stacks. We'll know once we start cutting into things. So as far as how that is going to get vented out of the building, but we've had our plumbers look at it, so we're pretty confident. But yes, to answer your question, all new plumbing. Yeah.
Good.
Have you had experience with the epoxy product that you're talking about?
We have. It's a very similar product to what's on the sports arena floor. It's a different manufacturer that we're speccing, but very similar product. So it's very, very durable, very cleanable. Our main concern was cleats, because initially we wanted to do a polished and sealed concrete, but the cleats over time will wear that seal down, and then you have a porous concrete again. So this epoxy system will truly lock that out. And if we do over time get small chips, it's repairable. So we can go in and fix any area. So.
Okay.
Sounds good. Finally.
I move to approve a contract with Ward Davis Builders for an amount not to exceed $149,760 for renovations to Fun Valley restrooms and authorize the mayor to sign.
Second.
Moved and seconded, please call the roll.
Deckent?
Yes.
Dave Line?
Yes.
Soldner?
Yes.
Tyros de Carvalho?
Yes.
Inskeep?
Yes. Next item, please.
Item 8, report of city officials.
Oh, apologies, I was reading notes. Jade, I'll start over this way if you don't mind.
Sure, thank you. I have a few items. I just wanted to remind everybody that today is the United Way of Reno County's campaign kickoff day. So I encourage you to get out and support that campaign in any way that you can. The goal is 1.35 million again this year, and Dr. Corey Jackson and his wife Amanda Jackson have agreed to chair that. So many kudos to them. And a reminder that the Kansas State Fair does start on Friday. So if you're unable to get a hold of me for the next 10 days or so, then that's where I'm at. Get out and enjoy a Prono Pup.
Something.
Second, the State Fair. Be sure to get out and have a good time and participate in the State Fair.
Third to the State Fair, if I might, for the same reason. We're going to have a lot of guests in town, so remember to be good stewards, and it's going to get a little crowded. The streets will have a little bit of traffic. Nothing like you would see in a major urban area, but for us relaxed drivers in Hutchinson, Kansas, it's going to seem like it's a little bit. So keep our tempers in check, and remember that they're guests in our humble city, and welcome them, and so on. John.
I just noticed on the news last night, Channel 12, that the Wichita City Council was considering joining a group, a national group, in terms of a lawsuit on opioids. And I was just wondering, have we been approached at all by anybody to be part of a lawsuit?
I don't think.
Not directly, no. It's out there. I think Reno County's given it some consideration, but I don't know that they've approached the city of Hutchinson.
Is this a same or similar lawsuit that some of the states are participating in?
It is. And of course, you have to be able to document your damages, which is a little bit difficult to determine the impact of opioids upon your community.
Actually, we've got leadership in the hospital who've already been documenting that for several years in a certain fashion. I mean, it wouldn't be exact, but I think that they would probably be willing to provide statistics if needed, because we've worked on that in the drug task force. Just something to consider.
Are you wanting to be proactive, or should we wait till last?
Well, I mean, I think we saw pretty clearly with what happened with the tobacco lawsuits, you know, a couple decades ago, that there will be money awarded to the states, I think, for this. And so, I mean, this community has been impacted very hard by the opioid crisis. So it might be something.
Do these things become a boondoggle? I mean, from the legal standpoint, or
I don't know.
what?
I was under the impression that isn't that all handled by Derek Schmidt, or like our Attorney General?
Oh, just a question. It just kind of caught my attention. They were considering it, whether or not we had been approached at all.
Not to throw any more work at you, Paul, but do you mind?
You want me to run that down, do you?
Just get into it and see.
We can look into
no
it.
obligation on our end, but yeah, appreciate it.
That's a good point, John.
Yeah.
I missed that one. I didn't hear that one.
did too.
Yeah.
I didn't see that. So.
Yeah. Nancy, anything?
Nothing.
Okay. City manager?
Just one thing, the mayor council. You know, we've talked some recently about the sale of the piece of property, the old Fun Valley slide. We've been approached by two different groups to lease that piece of property. It's the old water slide area directly north of Fun Valley. And so really there's a couple things we need some direction from the council. And first of all is, number one, are we interested in selling it, or only interested in leasing it? And number two, the process that we would go about. Justin and I have talked a little bit about this. You know, my issue is selling it, you know, not sure about the sustainability of some of these proposals, and, you know, maybe a lease in the long term would be most appropriate. And if something really grows and builds there, then you can look at a purchase at that time. But just really want to have that conversation today because we've got two parties that are interested in that. There may be others. And, you know, we have a council policy on the sale of city property and how we go about that. There is a process. So,
What's the size of the footprint of that?
trying to remember what the acreage was.
Yeah.
On that.
11
Good morning, Justin Combs again. It's about 6 acres.
or 6.
6 acres? Yeah. Are there improvements on the site? Or?
No. The only thing really of significance is the drainage lagoons. There are 2 lagoons on the site that we would have to maintain regardless of ownership or of the
2
lease
lagoons?
agreement. Yeah.
Those are
Sewer lagoons, I'm sorry.
Yeah.
Yep. Yeah. I guess my thoughts is I highly recommend that the city maintains ownership of the property.
Okay.
Primarily because in our master plan, access to the river was really pointed out as something that could be a very valuable recreational activity for the city and for the community. And so that's really, in my opinion, the only way we can guarantee that site maintains or remains an access point is if the city remains the owner of it. I guess the example is if we were to sell the property to somebody who does want to do river access now, you know, what happens in 10 years, 15, 20 years? Does that become developed privately? Does that access get cut off? If we truly want to maintain a river access site, I think it's in the city's best interest to maintain ownership. Now, we've talked about doing something for a long time, and obviously nothing's happened there, so maybe to get that moving, maybe having a lease agreement, in my opinion, is probably the best way to proceed, to find somebody who's willing to put the time and effort into it to really make it a nice attraction. But again, to protect that asset, that the city would remain the owner of the property would be my recommendation. And since we do have 2, at least 2 that are interested in the property, it's hard. How do we pick who do we negotiate a lease agreement with between the 2? And maybe there's more. So my thought is we do an RFP type where we just lay it all out there. You know, tell us the name of your business, tell us what your business plan is, those sorts of things, and see if we can find somebody who we can partner with to make the site into a nice usable access.
Have you gotten into what a lease might look like? That's your...
Not
we don't do a lot of
really,
that.
not really. I mean, we're not to that point yet. My initial thought would be the lease would be very little to no payment up front because there would be some initial investment by the leaser. I mean, they would need to improve the site. And then maybe 3, 4, 5 years down the road, we look at either a sum of money, a flat sum, or a revenue share or something like that, kind of once they get their feet under them and start moving. So would be kind of my recommendation. But again, until we have a business that we're negotiating with, it's hard to really kind of lay that all out there.
The 2 parties, and not to give anything away, but they're differing uses.
They
Similar.
are. Yeah. Yeah.
Okay,
Yeah.
different.
Both of them do include river access, but
River access.
Okay.
I'd
Well,
certainly concur with your recommendation then.
Yeah, the property's been vacant, not used, just something that costs us the time and money to maintain it. I was supportive of the idea of selling, but I think that the idea of leasing does make better sense. I'm hopeful that we can actually come to a fruitful lease agreement, because to have that property improved and have it used would definitely be beneficial, I would think. Is that within the city limits?
it is
No.
not.
No.
It is not.
So how do the taxes work on that?
Well, it'll be once we lease it for
You'd come back on the
it'll
tax
be a
roll. So.
taxable piece of property, which obviously we would want to recoup at least that, but
Yeah.
the property taxes on that parcel would not be a
No.
great deal.
Mm-mm.
There's no
I was
improvement.
going to ask
There's
something
nothing.
similar, yeah.
Nothing out
So,
there.
anyway, I'm supportive. I'd like to see us proceed and see and hope that something does come of it that can see that property develop and used.
So if I'm hearing everything right, then I would suggest follow up with your RFPs from the individuals and get it on the agenda so we can look at it or
Yep.
whatever.
Okay. Yep. We can start
Sounds
that
good.
process.
Perfect.
When would we expect that to all unfold? I know that there's a business that's already been investing in that site for a while, or running a pretty popular business out of there. So I want to make sure that we keep things moving along so they have the opportunity.
Yeah, I think through the fall, we'd like to work on that RFP, which would give us then kind of the fall and winter to really nail down a lease agreement. And so come next spring, we've got somebody with a signed agreement that they can start work for the next year's float season.
Okay, great. I'd like to see that lease to be, like you mentioned, very, very, very low, because we've done nothing with that.
Yeah.
We've done
My
nothing.
goal is not from the lease as a revenue stream per se, at least not initially, but yeah, more to protect the property, and so if something does change hands or something happens down the road, we have rights and access back to it. Yeah, so I would
Same,
agree.
yeah,
Yeah,
same.
and there's also is private property back behind there, so we would have to maintain the roadway. So there are 5 or 6 lots back there. So there's some other things that would be much more challenging if we sell the property as well. So again, keeping that lease agreement, we can ensure that there's always access.
To the back as well. Very good. Is that enough direction?
That's enough for me.
Yep.
That's fair
Thank you.
enough. Mr. Manager? anything
Yeah,
else
that's
to
all I
add?
had, other than request for an executive session for, is it attorney-client matters we want to, Paul, you can give us the
Why don't I
legal.
just give you a motion, then you can say so moved?
That makes it a little easier.
I move the city council recess into executive session pursuant to the consultation with attorney for the public body for attorney-client privilege communications to discuss the authority of boards and committees. The open meeting to resume in the city council chamber at
10:45.
10:45.
So moved.
So move, okay. Second.
Moved and second, please call the roll. I always hit you so fast, Linda, I apologize.
Deckent?
Yes.
Dave Line?
Yes.
Soldner?
Yes.
Pyrus de Carvalho?
Yes.
Inskeep?
Yes.
A reminder to us all, we have a special study
Yeah,
session
what's the
next
topic of that?
Tuesday.
It's the
Study
rental
session?
registration, housing
Housing.
commission.
Oh, is that what it is?
Yeah.
And that's at the
Fire training.
Command Center.
Right.
Fire command and training
I'm
center.
glad you brought that up. I was
Yeah.
gonna
And
say
you're
you're-
going
8
to
a.m.?
provide us lots
Yeah.
of data.
I'll probably still show up here.
Right.
You're going to provide us lots of data.
At 8 o'clock.
This concludes it. Well, it does and it doesn't. We'll come back to adjourn, but we're leaving. Thanks all for coming.